We open on a jungle world as 5 figures in armor trudge through the undergrowth. They move at speed, and it is clear that they know where they're going, as one of the figures in the lead is continually referencing a device in their hand. A device that emits a slow pinging sound as they trudge deeper and deeper through the undergrowth of this forested world. As they're going, one of the figures says, "The plasma ray should be not too far ahead. Everyone stay alert." The others shoulder rifles and other weapons as the group of 5 continues deeper and deeper into the forest. As that pinging sound from the device grows more frequent and insistent, they slow their pace and spread out a little bit, looking around. Just as those pings are now only a few seconds apart, we see one of the figures stop and say, "Everyone hold up." One of the others says, "What's wrong, Hex?" The man Hex, who is at the head of this group, looks around and says, "I think we're not alone. The plasma ray is not close enough yet. There's something else going on. There's something else here." The 5 figures study the massive trees around them, when suddenly a half-dozen figures step out from behind those trees and raise rifles in their direction. The 5 figures in armor with a stylized V etched on their pauldrons watch as these 6 figures in Elder League gear step out. Hex says, "Now what do we have here? Everyone be wary." And then he calls out to the group of Elder League mercenaries and says, "Elder League, we are Forge Spawn hunters. We are tracking prey. Do not interfere with us." The lead Elder League mercenary says, "This planet is under Hamshal control. You Verdot have no place here. Go back to your ship and leave. There's no need for any sort of unpleasantness between us." Hex says, "The only unpleasantness will come if you get in our way. We have a mission to perform for the good of all the Forge. Do not stand in our way." The Elder League mercenaries look back and forth to each other, and then their leader shrugs and fires. The 5 Forge Spawn hunters leap into action as they dive behind trees, as a spray of laser bolts fill the forest around them. They scatter, and Hex calls out and says, "Return fire!" Weapons fire echoes through this forest, and then all of a sudden, on the far flank, one of the Verdot Forge Spawn hunters calls out and says, "Cover me!" The others pop out with their weapons and unleash a torrent of fire. Hex leans around the corner and focuses on the arcane energies in the planet around him, and he causes one of the Elder League mercenaries to rise up in the air and crash through the underbrush. Meanwhile, that one figure dashes out from cover and closes on the line of Elder League mercenaries. There's a flash of iron as an iron sword emerges from a scabbard, and in a heartbeat, 1, 2, 3 of these Elder League mercenaries drop as a blade passes through their armor as if it was butter. The Elder League mercenaries who are still standing turn to face this new threat, and before they can bring their weapons to bear, the figure stabs upward through the armor and helmet of the leader of the Elder League mercenary, using the body as cover from the fire from the other two. She presses on and cuts down the fifth Elder League mercenary as her compatriots watch in detached interest as she ducks under the final spray of laser bolts from the final Elder League mercenary and slashes their legs out from under them, driving her blade into their exposed throat as they fall to the ground. In only a few seconds, it's over. Hex steps out from behind cover and says, "Havoc, you really do live up to your name." Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures, the solo actual play podcast where stories are told at the speed of dice. With me, Steve Morrison, your game master and solo player. Now come on, let's grab the dice and see where our story goes. Welcome back for episode 3 of season 3, Cry Havoc. Last week, Alexis Wolfe heard from her friend Raven that the station power on Scirocco Station was failing, and that if they did not get some new energy soon, they'd have to abandon the station. Wolfe heads to meet with Dr. Winter of the Radiant Council, who suggests a hypothesis that the creature from the planet Iris below Scirocco Station that she was doing experiments on were not the source of the energy, but instead that the energy came from a crystal that was in their nest. If she could get a sample of the crystal, she could ascertain if it could be used as a new power source. Wolfe swears to recover a piece of the crystal for examination, despite the dangers. She descends to the planet on her ship, the Dead Reckoning, but has to land far away. There are all sorts of quagmires and sinkholes in this jungle world, and she mostly avoids them, but she can't quite get close to the massive tree trunk where the nest is. It takes her hours and a few failed attempts before she gets close. Once there, she sees a crystal at the heart of the trunk, surrounded by a dozen of these undead, crab-like creatures. And that is where we pick up with this week's episode. Wolfe is leaning against this massive wooden trunk of this dead tree as she considers her options. This dozen of these undead, weird crab creatures are scuttling around inside the hulled-out husk of this massive tree trunk. This crystal that she needs to recover is inside, and she doesn't really want to have to try and fight 12 of these creatures. So I think she is considering what she can do in order to get at this crystal without having to fight her way through all these creatures. And I've got an idea. She wonders if they are drawn to the particular frequencies of the energy output of this crystal. And if she can fashion something and emulate that same energy signature, it might draw these creatures away so that she can get in there. That is what she is going to attempt to do, but I think as we're getting started here, she is going to open up her bag and she is going to shuffle through and see if she has some sort of energy source, battery or something like that, that she can alter and adjust to make capable of emitting this same frequency as the crystal inside. And I think she knows what that frequency is because she has research data on those creatures from Scirocco Station and what Dr. Winter achieved. So I think as we start out here, we are going to check our gear. When you check to see if you have a specific helpful item or resource, roll plus supply. So I'm going to roll my D6 plus my supply of 3, and I'm going to compare that against my 2d10 challenge dice. Let's get started. 8 for the action score, an 8 and a 9 for the challenge dice is a miss. And I only have 4 momentum, so that means I can't do anything about this miss. So on a miss, you don't have it, and the situation grows more perilous. Pay the price. So this is not starting out in a positive way for Alexis Wolfe. Let's roll on pay the price, see what happens. 60. Your equipment or vehicle malfunctions. Well, that's just perfect. She has this laser pistol on her hip, and that requires some sort of battery charge. I imagine she also has a couple of spare batteries in her bag, and so she rifles through her bag and pulls those out and checks them. And wouldn't you know it, every single one of them is depleted. And she is frustrated by that, and then basically thinks to herself, well, I at least have the one that's in the pistol. I'll give up being able to use the pistol, but at least I will be able to make this work. And so she pulls out her pistol and checks the charge on that. And of course, that is depleted as well. And I think it's at that point that she maybe realizes that being in close proximity to this crystal, even here outside of the trunk of this massive dead tree, the crystal itself has somehow depleted the energy of her weapon and the batteries, the spare batteries that she had. I think she realizes this as she goes to check some of her other gear and realizes that her comm is dead, that all of these different things that she has that require power have been sucked dry. I think the implication of that is interesting, because if this is a crystal that emits power, but it also drains the energy from other devices, like, is this even something that Wolfe can use? Is this something that she can bring back to Scirocco, or is it going to leach the energy out of her ship when she brings it aboard? And is it going to do the same thing to Scirocco Station? Is it the crystal itself that is the problem? Or is there something in the way that it's interacting with the creatures in this nest that is causing this draining effect? I don't know. Let's find out. Wolfe doesn't have the ability to distract these creatures. And as she's realizing that her power sources are dead, I think she has this momentary panic as she pulls up the power levels of her environmental suit. And she sees that it is, in fact, lower than it should be, considering how long she has been away from the ship. But it's not yet at dangerous levels. So I think she has this understanding that whatever this draining field is, it's incremental. And so as long as she doesn't dawdle for too long in the presence of this draining field, she should be able to get back to her ship before her suit runs out of energy. And so as she has that sudden moment of reassurance, she looks at the iron sword attached to her hip. And she says, well, it's a little formidable in there, but maybe I can do this the old-fashioned way. Maybe I should wait and see if they leave the nest. So Wolfe wants to avoid conflict with these creatures as much as possible. So I think she is going to wait and see what they do. Because yes, darkness is coming, night is coming, and it is possible that she's going to get caught out by a bunch of other creatures in the night. But also, if she just goes in there sword swinging, there's no guarantee that she's going to be able to take all 12 of those creatures. So I think she has to wait the night and she has to see what happens. Do they go out and hunt for something? They're undead creatures, so they probably don't need sustenance, but maybe there is something that draws them away. So I think that Wolfe is going to try and climb up the side of this trunk a little bit more and find a place where she can perch and watch without being as exposed to the elements. So I think that we should roll secure an advantage for this because she's trying to find herself a more advantageous position to observe what is going on inside this nest. So our choices are with edge, heart, iron, shadow, wits. I think this is wits. This is expertise, focus, or observation. She's done this sort of thing before. So she knows what spots that she can climb into and settle in and watch and maybe camouflage herself a little bit. So, well, let's roll plus wits, which is +2 for Wolfe. Here we go. 5 on the action score, 2 6s on the challenge dice for a miss with a match. So not starting out strong on this episode as we start off with 2 misses. On a miss, you fail or your assumptions betray you. Pay the price. I hate to say it, but I think this is pretty obvious. Wolfe looks up and sees what looks like a small alcove a little bit further up on this tree trunk. Maybe it was a knot when this tree was alive. And so she thinks, maybe I can climb up there and I can settle in for the night. So she does. She climbs up and she gets up into this knot and settles in. And then because this tree trunk is dead, the wood gives way and she falls. If it wasn't a match, I would have said that she fell back outside of the tree trunk and maybe it drew some attention. But I think because we got a match on that miss, she drops straight into the middle of this nest and right into the heart of these creatures. And I think we have to enter the fray as these creatures react to the invasion of a living creature into their undead lair. So let's enter the fray and get into some combat. When you initiate combat or are forced into a fight, envision your objective and give it a rank. If the combat includes discrete challenges or phases, set an objective with a rank for each. Then roll to see if you are in control. Let's talk about this challenge, because I don't think her objective is to kill the 12 creatures. Her objective is to get a piece of this crystal. That seems like a pretty challenging thing in here. So, do we want to go so far as to say that this is an extreme challenge to get this crystal out? Or is her objective to just get away right now and she forgets about the crystal at the moment? I feel like if she wants to get the crystal, it's going to be much, much more challenging. If she just wants to get up and get out of this nest alive, I think that's maybe a little bit easier, although not necessarily all that much easier. I think she's going to go for the crystal. I think she is confident enough that she thinks she can hold off these creatures long enough. I'm not even sure that she's thinking about this so much as she's just like, well, I'm here now, might as well try for it. So her objective is to recover a shard of the crystal. And that is going to be an extreme fight. So we are going to enter the fray, and I'm going to roll this plus wits because I think this is caught in a trap. It wasn't really necessarily a trap, but it is a situation where she has fallen and hit the ground And so it feels sort of trap-like. So roll plus witch, which is +2 to enter the fray. 4 on the action score, a 4 and a 3 on the challenge dice for a weak hit. So on a weak hit, I can choose to take +2 momentum or take control. As much as I want to take control, I feel like narratively speaking, it makes sense to be in a bad spot coming off of that fall. So I'm going to take the momentum. And Wolfe falls into the nest, hits the ground, and these crab-like undead creatures turn and click-clack, and close in on her. And I think she is going to immediately try to roll up onto her feet, and she draws her sword and tries to create a little bit of distance between herself and these crabby creatures that are closing in. So we're going to roll this plus edge. Edge is +2. Here we go. 5 on the action score, 2 6s on the challenge dice for another miss with a match. Oh boy, this is bad. Okay, so let us pay the price. 11. You face a tough choice. I mean, the obvious tough choice is to just give up on this fight and run, because it is clear that this is not going to work, or to keep pressing on. I think she's going to press on. She's going to keep going for this, but I think she is going to have to suffer for it. I think there is some hurt involved in this as the situation worsens. So I think she's going to take a little bit of harm and a little bit of stress. So we're going to just reduce 1 each on health and spirit, because I don't think this represents her actually taking a whole lot of hits from these creatures, so much as that she tries to roll up onto her feet. She succeeds at that. She draws her sword, and then she tries to create a little bit of space, but where she fell is actually quite close to this crystal, and there are several of these creatures that are around her, and there really is no space for her to maneuver as they close in with their claws, click, clack, click, clack. And I think she's not able to create any space, and she does take a couple of glancing blows as she fends off the first assaults. And then she's realizing that she is really in the middle of it here. And so I think she is going to try and fight back and attempt to kill a few of these creatures and thereby open a little bit of space for herself. So she is going to clash, and this is plus iron because we're in close quarters. Come on, dice, turn around. 9 on the action score, a 1 and a 10 on the challenge dice for a weak hit. So we're going to mark progress, but you are dealt a counter blow or setback. You stay in a bad spot and must pay the price. So for our progress, we're going to mark 2 ticks of progress. That's not a whole lot of progress, as we remain in a bad spot, and Wolfe is, I think, going to take another hit. And because she's surrounded by a couple of these creatures, this is going to be 2 harm instead of just 1 harm. So that has brought her health down already to 2, which is not great, and I think we should try and endure harm. So we're going to roll plus iron, because that is the greater. Plus 3 on this. 8 for the action score, a 5 and a 2 for the challenge dice for a strong hit. So she takes back control, and then I can choose to shake it off and take plus 1 health, or take plus 1 momentum and embrace the pain. I'm going to take the health back. So health goes up back to 3, and she shakes it off. So let's envision this. Wolfe is standing in the middle of this massive hollowed out tree trunk, surrounded by these crab creatures that are click, click, click their claws as they close in around her. There's broken detritus of wood from the knot that she was standing in that fell down around her. And as these creatures close in, one of them latches onto her ankle and like squeezes through her boot. And she grunts and turns and stabs her blade down through the creature. And then she spins around and kicks another one away as they're closing in. Click, 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 click. And I think she is facing them and fighting as hard as she can, and she gets a glancing blow across her midsection, and she sort of dances away from it a little bit. She goes with the momentum of the blow, and so it reduces the harm, and it kind of, with that momentum, she's able to vault over one of the creatures, and she sort of gains a little bit of space between herself and these creatures. And now I think she is going to try to land on her feet and move around to get a better vantage point on these creatures. Because again, she doesn't have her laser pistol. She can't create distance and fire at them at range. Like, she's got her sword, and that's about it right now. So I think she is trying to maneuver herself in such a way that she is only having to fight a few of them at the same time. So she is going to attempt to gain ground plus edge. 7 on the action score, a 2 and a 6 on the challenge dice for a strong hit. We're turning the dice around. So on a strong hit, we get to choose 2. Mark progress, take +2 momentum, add +1 on the next move. I'm going to take the momentum, which goes up to 8, and then we're going to mark another progress on our track here. Now we have 1 full box on this progress track. As again, she's trying to recover a shard of the crystal, but she's going to have to fight her way through these creatures in order to get close enough to peel off some of that crystal. So here we go, as she has now arranged the battlefield in a way. I think she's fought her way back towards the entrance of this nest. And so there are now only a couple of these creatures that are close to her. And she turns and is going to stride towards them with her sword. And she's going to try and stab through one, remove the blade, and then slash down and chop through the other one as we go into a strike. Plus iron again. This is 6 for the action score, a 1 and a 2 on the challenge dice for another strong hit. So we mark progress twice. That is going to fill up another box of progress. So we're at 2 out of 10. We got a long way to go. As Wolfe does just that, she steps forward, she stabs through the one, she removes the blade, and then chops down through another one. These undead creatures that look like they're decaying, her blade just cuts through the soft parts of them. But I think that's that last one that she slashes down at, her blade sort of skids off of the hard carapace, and it bounces a little bit, but the creature itself is still moving. And she is going to step forward and stab again as she attempts another strike. 7 for the action score, 6 and a 7 for the challenge dice for a weak hit. So we mark progress twice, but expose yourself to danger. Now we're in a bad spot. So again, I think this looks like, for a moment, she shifts her form and almost has this fencer's grace as she lunges forward and stabs once, and then pulls back, and then stabs again as 2 more of these creatures are wounded but not destroyed as they're driven back. But I think some of these crab creatures are pretty quick and agile, and they have now skittered around and are flanking her, and she feels this pressure of assault from behind, and she is now in a bad spot. What is she going to do? Is she going to try and just continue fighting these creatures and do a clash? Or is she going to try and maneuver Yeah, I think she's going to try, and once again, this seems to be working for her. So she's trying to maneuver herself back into a position where she has some space. And so she's going to vault over one of the ones that she stabbed and sort of stunned a little bit. And then she is going to try and run sort of to the opposite end of this nest. And I'm thinking of it as almost a bowl-shaped depression inside this tree trunk. And this crystal, this glowing crystal, has emerged out of the center of the basin of this bowl at the heart of this tree, this dead tree. And it is almost as though it is a perfect sphere in this hollowed out tree trunk. Except it's not perfect anymore because Wolfe fell through a bunch of it. So she is going to try and maneuver over. Maybe she's kicking at some of that detritus. Are there any other things inside this nest? Are there like egg sacs or something like that? Something that she could potentially use as a barrier between herself and these creatures? Are there egg sacs in here? I think it's probably 50-50. I'm going to say 50-50 because these creatures are undead. If they were living crab creatures, I'd say it would be likely or even almost certain. But I'm going to say it's 50-50 that there are some sort of eggs in here. 68 is a no. No, there are no eggshells. These creatures don't hatch as undead creatures. So maybe somewhere on this planet there are actually living creatures that look like this, and these particular ones have been turned undead, maybe by the crystal, or maybe by something else, some interaction between them and the crystal. Unclear as of yet. But weirdly enough, there is just this bowl-shaped depression in this tree trunk, and there's not a whole lot else here other than maybe some bones of like creatures and stuff like that. But other than that, it's just kind of a weirdly open space. And so Wolfe is going to attempt to maneuver by pursuing, fleeing, dodging, all that jazz. So this will be +2 as she rolls plus edge as we react under fire. We got a 5 for the action score, 2 5s for the challenge dice, which is another miss with a match. I'm going to burn my momentum. I've got 8 momentum. I do not want to suffer another match and miss. So we're going to burn the momentum down to 2, and that will give us a strong hit. So on a strong hit, you succeed and are in control. Take +1 momentum. So momentum goes back up to 3. She's able to dodge a maneuver and escape the flanking maneuver of these creatures. And now she turns and is going to strike once again. And I forgot to mention that I have an asset that could be of use here. And that is Alexis Wolfe is a blade master. So if you wield a bladed weapon, when you clash or strike in close quarters, add +1. On a strong hit with a match, mark progress. Also, once per fight, you may re-roll any dice as you make a move to attack or defend using your blade. So I should not forget that as I strike here. So we're going to strike plus iron, which is +3, and then I get +1 for the Blade Master asset. So this is +4 on this strike. That is going to be a 9 on the action score, a 3 and a 4 on the challenge dice, or another strong hit. So that is going to mark progress twice. We're up to 4 boxes of progress, as I think she has now killed maybe 4 of these creatures and wounded a couple others. She draws back a little bit and I think tries once again to create a little bit of an opening as she retreats to the back end of this depression in this tree trunk. She is about as far away from the crystal as she can be, and she is going to try and, I think, figure out how she's going to get close enough to get that shard and then get out of here. So we are going to gain ground by coordinating a plan, studying a situation, or cleverly gaining leverage. This is rolling plus wits. Here we go. 3 on the action score, a 2 and a 3 on the challenge dice, which is a weak hit. So for gain ground, with a weak hit, I can choose one. I can mark progress, take +2 momentum, or add +1 to my next move. I'm going to take that progress because every little bit helps. So we're now at 4.5 boxes of progress, and Wolfe backs up. I think she doesn't gain all that much time to think through this because the creatures are pursuing her with an undead focus. And so she eyeballs the crystal and she thinks, I wonder if I can just cut through it. And I think that's exactly what she's going to do. So she is going to gear herself up, maybe press herself back up against the wall of this trunk, and then propel herself forward, run towards the crystal, and just try to chop off a bit of it. This could be a terrible idea. We're going to find out, as I think this is going to be gaining leverage with force, powering through, or making a threat, as she is just trying to brute force this crystal. So this is going to be plus iron, which is +3 as we gain ground once again. 8 on the action score, a 3 and a 9 on the challenge dice for another weak hit. So we keep control, but we can mark progress, take momentum, or add +1. Again, I'm just going to take the progress as she runs forward, and I think she does exactly what she plans to do, which is slash across the crystal with her blade and shatter the top third of it. And pieces of the crystal go scattering around this nest. I think this is an important place to ask a question of the Oracle. Are these creatures in some way tied to the crystal? Because if they are, I wonder if destroying or damaging the crystal in this way affects them in some manner. I think that it is 50-50 on whether or not they are connected to this crystal. 70 is a no. No, they're not connected to the crystal. So maybe the crystal has nothing to do with what turned them into these undead creatures. Maybe they were just drawn to this crystal. Or maybe this crystal is the thing that turned them undead, but they're not tied to it. It's not like it is their power source, if that makes sense. So the fight continues. They are unconcerned by this destruction of the crystal in their nest. They simply want to take a bite out of this living creature that's been running around their nest. Wolfe is now looking around. She spots a sizable shard of the crystal, and she is going to try and go for it. So I think once again, this will be gain ground plus edge as she runs towards it, fending off some of these creatures as they're trying to close in around her. 5 on the action score, a 1 and a 5 on the challenge dice for another weak hit. We shall mark progress once again. And with that, she has a shard of the crystal, but I think the sizable shard that she went for is similarly on the back side of this trunk, so far away from the opening of this depression in the tree trunk. So she is going to have to fight her way through a couple more of these creatures to get to the outer edge where she can escape. So she's going to line up with her sword. She quickly sets her feet, and I think she is going to charge forward, +4 on this as she strikes. 5 on the action score, 3 and a 1 on the challenge dice for a strong hit. We mark progress twice. That gets us to 6.5 boxes of progress here. I think she cuts down another few of these undead crab-like creatures, and she is now close to the edge, but I don't think she's quite there yet. She has an opening, and she is going to take it. So she's going to run for the exit to this nest with a chunk of this crystal shard in hand. She's going to attempt to gain ground one more time with edge. 3 on the action score, 10 and a 7 on the challenge dice for a miss. So on a miss, your foe gains the upper hand, the fight moves to a new location, or you encounter a new peril. You are in a bad spot and must pay the price. Let's pay the price here. 84. You are stressed. Well, that seems likely. So I think she's going to take 2 stress, which is going to take her from 4 down to 2 on her spirit as she tries to escape. But I think these crab-like creatures anticipate her move, and they maneuver around and cut her off, and now she has to fight them hand-to-hand right there at the exit of this trunk. And I think she's going to clash. So this is going to be plus iron once again. She gets +1 for her Blade Master as she is clashing in close quarters. A 5 on the action score, a 10 and a 3 on the challenge dice. That is going to be a weak hit, so she would mark progress, but would be dealt a counterblow or setback. Stay in a bad spot and pay the price. I am going to use my Blade Master asset to re-roll once per fight any dice as you make a move to attack or defend using your blade. So I got a 3 on one of the challenge dice. I'm going to leave that. I've got a 10 and I got a 1 for my action die. So I'm going to re-roll those 2 dice and hope for a better outcome. I got it. So I've got now a 10 for the action score, a 4 and a 3 for the challenge dice, which is a strong hit. So I can mark progress twice and take control. So once again, she is cut off from the exit by 4 of these crab creatures, the last 4 that are intact, and they are snapping at her. She is sweating inside of her suit. Her focus is intense as she sets her stance, as she cuts through these creatures in a flurry and a dance. And then she is going to try and duck out of this trunk and escape, as we are going to now, in control, take decisive action to get away from this spot. So when you seize an objective in a fight, envision how you take decisive action. Then roll the challenge dice and compare to your progress. I have 7 progress, rolling my 10 dice on this extreme fight. I got a 6 and a 1 for a strong hit. On a strong hit, you prevail. Take +1 momentum. Wolfe emerges out of the hole in the trunk, and she is grasping a shard of this crystal. She's sweating. She's breathing heavily. She has this weird Icarus blood on her iron blade as she stumbles down the trunk of the tree, and she can hear the last few creatures in there clicking and clacking behind her as she makes her way around the edge of the tree trunk and towards freedom. But she can't quite go back to the ship yet. Night is falling on Iris, and there may be many nocturnal creatures between her and the dead reckoning. She may have to find a place to hole up and rest, especially so that she can figure out if taking this crystal back to her ship is going to leave her stranded on the planet. But for now, she makes her way around the edge of the sinkholes and the quagmires, away from the hollowed out tree trunk of this strange undead crab creature nest, with the objective of her vow in her hand. And I don't know about you, but I think that's worth 2 more marks of progress on her vow. Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thanks so much to Syrinscape for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please spread the word, and if you want to support the show directly, leave me a review or buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/errantadventures. If you want to interact with me, I'm at errantsolopod on Twitter and Instagram, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Are you looking for a D&D podcast with a dark side? Something more like Game of Thrones and less like Monty Python? Tale of the Manticore is part dark fantasy audio drama, part solo D&D RPG. There's no plot armor here. The dice make all the important decisions. Join me as I resurrect the excitement, wonder, and emotion of old-school D&D. Made for a mature audience, Tale of the Manticore is both a fiction and a game. It's the story where chaos rolls.